Hello everyone, my name is Jinjos, and welcome to my playthrough of Arkham Horror LCG. We will be playing through the Night of the Zealot campaign, starting with the first scenario, The Gathering. While I have played this scenario before, I am far from an expert and excited to learn more as I build decks and play through the campaigns. This is a post-production video of my playthrough. For this playthrough, I asked my wife which two characters I should use. She wanted to see some girl power, so we'll be using Daisy and Wendy, with Wendy being our lead investigator. Let's take a look at Daisy's deck list, which will only contain cards that come in the core box. To take advantage of her investigator's special ability, her deck will contain 2 copies of medical text, 2 copies of Research Librarian to fetch those tomes, 2 copies of Old Book of Lore, and one of her unique cards, Daisy's Tote Bag. Old Book of Lore is definitely a key card in this deck. Hopefully I can get it on the board early. To have Daisy become an investigating machine, we'll be including 2 copies of Magnifying Glass, 2 copies of Deduction, and 2 copies of Dr. Milan Christopher. Not wanting to leave her completely defenseless, we will be including 2 copies of Mind Over Matter and 1 copy of Shriveling. In terms of her skill cards, we'll be including 2 copies of Fearless, 2 copies of Manual Dexterity, 2 copies of Unexpected Courage, and 2 copies of Guts. We will fill the rest of the deck with some powerful Seeker cards, which includes a copy of Holy Rosary, 2 copies of Ward of Protection, and 2 copies of Scrying. We also have 2 copies of Emergency Cash, and for her weaknesses, we'll be including her signature weakness, the Necromonicon, and for her random weakness, we have the Silver Twilight Acolyte. Moving on to Wendy's deck, Wendy will be interacting with the enemy more often than Daisy, so her deck includes 2 copies of Backstab, 2 copies of Sneak Attack, 2 copies of Elusive, 1 copy of Stray Cat, and her signature card, Wendy's Amulet. Next, we include a handful of cards that add some value to her actions. We have 1 copy of Leo DeLuca, 2 copies of Rabbit's Foot, 2 copies of Burglary, and 2 copies of Pickpocketing. To help in combat, we include 2 copies of Baseball Bat, 2 copies of Lucky, and to make sure we can play these cards, 2 copies of Emergency Cash. With combat not being our strong suit with these 2 investigators, we want to gather clues ASAP. We include 2 copies of Perception and 2 copies of Flashlight. We also included 2 copies of Unexpected Courage, 2 copies of Manual Dexterity, 2 copies of Guts. Our signature weakness is Abandon and Alone, and our random weakness is Paranoia. I feel pretty confident with these 2 decks, but let me know in the comment section of any changes you would make. Keep in mind, I'm only using cards from the core set. We will be playing on the standard difficulty in terms of using the Chaos Bag, but we will be using the hard/expert side of the scenario card, which will determine what occurs when certain tokens are drawn. In this case, the skull will count as a -2, and if we fail, we must put a ghoul enemy into play. The cultist will have us reveal a second token, and if we fail, we will take 2 horror. The tablet will count as a -4, and if there is a ghoul at my location, I will take 1 damage and 1 horror. With that out of the way, let us begin. It is late at night. You are holed up in your study, researching the bloody disappearances that have been taking place in the region. A few hours into your research, you hear the sound of strange chanting coming from your parlor down the hall. At the same time, you hear dirt churning as if something were digging beneath the floor. As you leap to investigate, the door to your study vanishes before your eyes, leaving behind only solid wall. You're trapped inside your study until you find another way out. We will place the study in play with 4 clues on it, and both investigators will start there. Wendy's starting hand contains a Sneak Attack, Burglary, Rabbit's Foot, Manual Dexterity, and a Paranoia. We mulligan the Paranoia and the Manual Dexterity and draw a Flashlight and a Stray Cat. Daisy's starting hand contains a Ward of Protection, the Necromonicon, Dr. Milan Christopher, Fearless, and Unexpected Courage. We mulligan the Necromonicon and the Fearless to draw 2 copies of Old Book of Lore. We both start with 5 resources, and Wendy will start us out. Wanting to prep ourselves, we play a Flashlight for 2, a Burglary for 1, and a Rabbit's Foot for 1. For Daisy's turn, we spend 3 to play Old Book of Lore, immediately using her Tome Free action to activate it to choose from the top 3 cards of our deck. We reveal a Holy Rosary, a Deduction, and a Daisy's Tote Bag. We decide to keep the Daisy's Tote Bag, but in hindsight, it might have been better to take the Deduction. We then spend 2 to play Daisy's Tote Bag, and for our last action, we investigate, going 5 to 2, drawing a -4, and causing us to fail. With no enemies around, we move to the Upkeep, each gaining a resource, and Wendy drawing a Backstab, and Daisy drawing a Research Librarian. We add a Doom to the agenda and draw our encounter cards. Wendy draws a Ghoul Minion, and Daisy draws a Swarm of Rats. Not exactly how I was hoping to start the game off with having to deal with combat so early. Feeling a little tense, we have Wendy attempt to evade the Ghoul Minion, going 4 to 2. We draw a Skull, which leads to a success, and we evade the Ghoul Minion. We use our Flashlight to investigate the study, going 3 to 0, and succeed when we draw a +1. We use it again, going 3 to 0, drawing a -2, and succeeding. With Daisy up next, we attack the Swarm of Rats, committing Ward of Protection to the check, going 3 to 1. We draw a +1, defeating the Swarm of Rats. Using her free tome action, we activate the Old Book of Lore, targeting Wendy, revealing a baseball bat, a Leo DeLuca, and a Lucky. We decide to keep Leo DeLuca and aim to get him out as soon as possible, though I was very tempted to keep the Lucky as well. We then investigate twice, going to 5-2, drawing a skull, and a -1, succeeding both times. Not wanting to advance the act at this point, we move to the upkeep, gaining a resource and drawing a copy of Manual Dexterity for both Wendy and Daisy. After adding a Doom to the agenda, we draw Frozen in Fear for Wendy and a Dissonant Voice for Daisy. At the start of the next turn, we turn in our 4 clues to advance the act. You notice that the edge of your newly purchased rug are tattered and mud-stained. Finding this odd, you shift the furniture aside and pull back the rug. To your surprise, you see the door leading out of your study. You slowly turn the knob and the door swings open, revealing the hallway below. You jump through the doorway, landing on your feet on soft dirt. The door to the study slams shut above you. The smell of burning wood fills the narrow hall, intermingled with the scent of rot and decay. A glowing barrier blocks the path to your parlor. As you move toward it, intense heat forces you to back away. Picking up a handful of dirt, you toss it at the barrier and watch with horror as the dirt incinerates. Perhaps there's something in the cellar or the attic that can help. We then discard the ghoul minion, place down the parlor, hallway, attic, and cellar, and both investigators land in the hallway. Wendy investigates the hallway, but taps the burglary to try and gain some resources to play Leo and going 3-1. We unfortunately draw a tombstone, causing us to fail. We then tap our rabbit's foot, drawing our second copy of Manual Dexterity. Wanting to tackle the more difficult location first, we then move to the cellar. 4 clues are placed on it, and we take 1 damage from slipping down the stairs. Wendy's turn starts and moves into the cellar, taking a damage from slipping down the stairs as well. We activate the Old Book of Lore, targeting herself, revealing a Mind Over Matter, Ward Protection, and the Necromonicon. We choose the Mind Over Matter in case a stronger enemy appears. We then investigate, going 5-4, drawing a -1 and succeeding. For our last action, we investigate again, but committed unexpected courage to the test, going 7-4. We draw a -2, succeeding and gaining the second clue. At the end of our turn, we test our Frozen to Fear, going 4-3, drawing a -1 and succeeding. The -2 was a mistake in recording. We then discard Frozen to Fear and Dissonant Voice. With no enemies on board, we each gain a resource with Daisy drawing her second Research Librarian, and Wendy drawing her signature weakness, Abandoned and Alone. She will take 2 Horror and exile her discard pile. We will place a Doom on the agenda, which will advance it. Your house continues to change before your very eyes. The walls have decayed, and the ground in many rooms has turned to dirt. It is almost as if you have been transported somewhere else entirely, although every now and again you recognize elements of your former home. With Wendy already having 2 Horror, we will choose to have each investigator discard a card at random, with Wendy discarding a stray cat, and Daisy sadly discarding a Mind Over Matter. The floor beneath you is giving away, and you see a vast network of tunnels twisting into the darkness below. Shapes and silhouettes of strange creatures move swiftly through the tunnels, trying to find a way up. You probably don't want to be here when they do. Wendy then draws a Grasping Hands from the encounter deck. We commit a Manual Dexterity to the test, going 6-3, and draw a Cultist token and then a 0, leading us to succeed and to draw an emergency cash due to the Manual Dexterity. Daisy then draws a Crypt Chill. With having no cards to commit to the test, we go 3-4. We draw a Tombstone and fail the test. We discard the Old Book of Lore as I have another one in my hand, but looking back at it, it should have been the tote bag. Obviously you can see that I valued the tote bag a lot more than I should have. We have Daisy start the turn by paying 3 and putting into play our second copy of Old Book of Lore. We reveal a Guts, a Ward Protection, and a Shriveling. We decide to keep the Guts, but probably should have kept the Shriveling since I lost my Mind Over Matter last turn. We then investigate, going 5-4, drawing the Cultist token, and then a -1, leading to a success and gaining a clue. We investigate for our final action, but draw an automatic fail. For Wendy's turn, we play an emergency cash, gaining 3 resources. We then spend 6 to play Louis DeLuca, granting us an extra action. We then use the last charge on our flashlight to investigate, going 3-2, but draw a -3, causing us to fail. We tap the Rabbit's Foot in response, drawing our second copy of Flashlight. And for our final action, we gain a resource. Each investigator gaining a resource, and Wendy drawing a baseball bat, and Daisy drawing a scrying. We place a Doom on the encounter, and Wendy draws an Obscuring Fog, which is going to be placed in the cellar, raising its shroud value from 4 to 6. Daisy then draws a Grasping Hands. Having only 4 HP left, we commit a Manual Dexterity and a Research Librarian, going 5-3. We pull a Cultist and a Skull from the bag, which nullifies the effect. We then draw a Guts off of the Manual Dexterity trigger. Daisy starts his turn by activating the Old Book of Lore, revealing the Necromonicon, Deduction, and Fearless, deciding to keep Deduction to clear out the attic as quickly as possible. We then made the tough decision to get the last clue in the cellar, as it will be one of the few ways we can gain victory points with these 2 characters. We commit a copy of Scrying and Dr. Milan Christopher to the test, going 7-6, drawing a -1 and succeeding. We gain the last clue and discard the obscuring fog. For our last 2 actions, we move into the hallway and then into the attic, taking 1 horror and placing 4 clues. On Wendy's turn, we move to the hallway, then tap our burglary to investigate the hallway, going 3 to 1. We draw a skull, leading to success, and we gain 3 resources. We then spend 2 putting into play our baseball bat and discarding our flashlight. For our last action, we move into the attic and take 1 horror. Moving to upkeep, we each gain a resource, and Wendy draws a rabbit's foot, while Daisy draws a manual dexterity. We're going to place a doom on the agenda, and for our encounters, Wendy draws a ravenous ghoul, and Daisy draws an icy ghoul, which spawns in the cellar. Luckily, we just left there. We have Daisy start by activating her old book of lore, targeting Wendy, and revealing a pickpocketing, a guts, and an unexpected courage. Aiming for some flexibility, we choose unexpected courage. We investigate, committing a deduction to the test and going 6 to 1, drawing a 0, and granting us 2 clues. We investigate again, going to 5 to 1, drawing a -4, but still succeeding. And for our final action, we investigate going 5 to 1, drawing a +1, and clearing out the attic of clues. Wendy attacks the ghoul by paying 3 to play backstab, and commits manual dexterity to the attack, going 6 to 3. We unfortunately draw an automatic fail, nullifying the attack, and wasting our resources and cards. We activate the rabbit's foot and draw guts for our troubles. Wendy then activates the baseball bat, increasing her strength to 3, and as I commit the unexpected courage, bumping it up to 5. We draw the elder sign, leading to 2 damage being placed on the ghoul. We then roll the dice by activating the baseball bat and attacking 3 for 3. We luckily pull a 0, leading to us defeating the ghoul. For our last action, we move from the attic into the hallway. We then gain a resource, and Wendy draws a pickpocketing, and Daisy draws an unexpected courage. We place a doom on the agenda, and Wendy draws a crypt chill. Not stressing if we lose burglary, we don't commit any cards, going 4 to 3, but we draw a 0, succeeding. Daisy draws a rotting remains, we commit a guts to the test, going 5 to 3. We draw a -3, and it leads to us taking 1 horror. Daisy starts by moving from the attic into the hallway. We activate our old book of lore, targeting Wendy. We reveal an elusive, an emergency cache, and a paranoia. We keep the elusive to help us avoid any big enemies we might run into. We then draw medical text to prepare for what is to come. We then turn in our 6 clues to advance to the 3rd act. Using a barrel from the attic, you carry ice and snow from the cellar and hurl it at the barrier. The barrier sparks and shudders as it consumes the ice, then hisses and fades out of existence. A woman with a torch stands in your parlor, a glimmer of hatred in her eyes. "What have you done to my barrier?" she screams, furious. Before you can answer, a ghastly wail sounds behind you, and a creature wearing robes and a deer skull mask tears through the walls, advancing towards you. We then place Lita Chandler into play in the parlor, and the ghoul priest in the hallway, engaged with Daisy. Daisy attempts to evade the ghoul priest by committing a manual dexterity to the test and going 4 to 4. We draw a -2, failing the test. We then have Wendy engage with the ghoul priest and attempt to evade. I commit elusive and pickpocket to the test, going 6 to 4, drawing a -4. I then discard my copy of flashlight to redraw a token, and succeed when I draw a -2. I then move into the parlor. Rolling the dice, I try and parlay with Lita Chandler, going 3 to 4 in a desperate attempt, but we draw an automatic fail. We pitch a spare rabbit, so try again, drawing a -1, not my smartest move. Failing the test, we activate Rabbit's Foot, and being blessed by the Elder One, we draw a Perception. We then each gain a resource, and Wendy draws her 2nd copy of Elusive, and Daisy draws an Emergency Cache. We add a Doom to the agenda, and Wendy draws a Dissonant Voice, preventing us from playing any assets or events the next turn. For Daisy's encounter card, she draws a Grasping Hands. We decide to save our Unexpected Courage for the Ghoul Priest, and make no commitments, going 2 to 3. We draw a -1, taking 2 damage. Wendy starts our turn by committing a Perception to the Parlay test, going 5 to 4, drawing a 0, and succeeding. We then gain the Lita Chandler card, discarding Leo DeLuca. This is where I made a gameplay mistake, and forgot that I lose my extra action since Leo DeLuca was discarded. I apologize for this oversight, and hope for the next video to be free of these rule mistakes. I then move into the parlor, engage with the Ghoul Priest, and attempt to evade it by committing an Elusive to the test and going 5 to 4. We draw a -3, but we pitch a Guts to redraw an Elder Sign, causing the Ghoul Priest to be exhausted. On Daisy's turn, we activate the Old Book of Lore, targeting Wendy. We reveal a Backstab, a Sneak Attack, and an Unexpected Courage. After a long time of debating, I choose Unexpected Courage. We then play our Emergency Cache, gaining 3 resources. We then play Medical Text for 2, and move into the parlor. We discard Dissonant Voice. We each gain a resource, and Wendy draws a Pickpocketing, and Daisy draws the card we've been avoiding most of the game, the Necromonicon, and we place 3 Horror on it. We place a Doom on the agenda, and Wendy draws an Ancient Evils, placing another Doom on the agenda. Daisy then draws a Rotting Remains. We commit a Guts to the test, going 5 to 3, and succeed when we pull a -2. The trigger from Guts allows us then to draw Shriveling. Wendy starts us off by attempting to evade the Ghoul Priest, committing an Unexpected Courage and a Pickpocket to the test, going 7 to 4. We draw a -1, succeeding and exhausting the Ghoul Priest. Spending 2, we play Sneak Attack, dealing 2 damage to the Ghoul Priest, And then for our final action, we move into the parlor to prep. Daisy then activates her medical text, going 5 to 2, and drawing a cultist and a -1 token from the bag, succeeding and healing 1 damage from Daisy. We spend 3 to put Shriveling into play. We then activate the Old Book of Lore, revealing a Deduction, a Fearless, and a medical text, keeping the Fearless. Realizing I can activate medical text multiple times, I do so, going 5 to 2, drawing a -1, and healing myself for 1 more damage. We then move to Upkeep, gaining 1 resource, and Wendy drawing her random weakness, Paranoia, causing me to discard all my resources and a magnifying glass for Wendy. We then place a Doom on the agenda and advancing it. A feral beast, roughly humanoid with canine casts and hooves for feet, tears through the ground in front of you. Below the floor, you can see vast tunnels beneath your house. Fiendish howling echoes from deep within the underground caverns. You hear a crazed howl outside, and suddenly all the creatures turn their attention to that sound. They rush to escape the house, breaking down doors and clawing at everything in their way. We then discard until we draw a Ravenous Ghoul and place it in the parlor, and engaging with Wendy. Wendy then draws a Rotting Remains. Having no cards to commit, we go 4 to 3, luckily pulling a +1 and succeeding. Daisy then draws a Ghoul minion, who spawns in the parlor. We then activate Shriveling to attack the Ghoul minion, committing a Fearless to the test, going 4 to 2, and drawing a +1, killing the Ghoul minion. Daisy activates the Old Book of Lore, targeting Wendy, revealing a Wendy's Amulet, a Burglary, and a baseball bat. We keep the Wendy's Amulet for the skill commitment. We activate the Shriveling to attack the Ravenous Ghoul, going 3 to 3. We draw an Elder Sign, but due to the Necromonicon, it is changed to an automatic fail. We end Daisy's turn by drawing a Magnifying Glass. On Wendy's turn, she activates the baseball bat, going 4 to 3, drawing a -1. We do 3 damage in total, 2 from the bat and 1 from Leader Chandler, killing the Ravenous Ghoul. We then stupidly decide to gain a resource, and then investigate the parlor by activating our Burglary, going 3 to 2, but draw a -3, causing us to fail. We activate the Rabbit's Foot, drawing a Guts. During the enemy phase, the Ghoul Priest moves into the parlor and attacks Daisy, dealing 2 damage and 2 horror. The Icy Ghoul also moves to the hallway. We each then gain a resource, and Wendy draws a Lucky, and Daisy draws a Holy Rosary. We then add 2 Doom to the agenda due to the new rules implemented by the agenda. Wendy then draws a Grasping Hands, going 4 to 3. We draw a -2, dealing damage to Wendy. Daisy draws a Crypt Shield, going 3 to 4. We draw a Skull, causing us to fail. We discard the asset card, the Necromonicon, and jump for joy. Due to us failing the test, though, we have to place a Ghoul into play. We choose a Ghoul minion, having it come engaged with when Daisy activates Shriveling, attacking the Ghoul minion, committing her Holy Rosary, going 4 to 2. We draw an Elder Sign, and deal the 2 damage needed to kill the Ghoul minion. With not many options, we try to evade from the Ghoul Priest, going 2 to 4, drawing a -1 and a -3. Looking back, I should have drawn cards for the skill test here, hoping to draw something that could help us in the combat, but I digress. Swinging for the fences, Wendy activates the baseball bat and commit Unexpected Courage, going 6 to 4. We draw a -2 and succeed, dealing 3 damage to the Ghoul Priest. Going for it again, we activate the bat, committing Wendy's Amulet to the test, going 6 to 4. We draw a Cultist, and then a -2, succeeding and dealing 3 damage to the Ghoul Priest. I'm on fire right now. With Lucky in my back pocket, we activate the bat, going 4 to 4 with no commitments, and draw 0, dealing the final 3 damage to the Ghoul Priest and winning this scenario. I was jumping for joy. I was shocked that we just won. We then advance the act. When the rogue creature falls, the fiendish swarm burrows back into the ground and the chaos of the house quiets. But the stranger in your parlor doesn't seem relieved. You broke my seal that was set to trap the ghouls within. She raises her torch. Now we must take more direct measures and burn this hell pit to the ground. We refuse to follow the overzealous woman's orders and kick her out of our house for fear that she will set it ablaze without your permission. Fools, you are making a grave mistake, she warns. You do not understand that the threat that lurks below, the grave dangers we are all in. Still shaken by the night's events, you decide to hear the woman out. Perhaps she can shed some light on these bizarre events, but she doesn't seem to trust you very much. To wrap things up, Leader Chandler isn't included in our deck due to us not allowing her to burn our house down. Wendy will gain 7 experience, and Daisy will gain 6. If you have any suggestions for upgrades to the deck for the next scenario, let me know. Keep in mind, I'm only using cards from the core box. Thank you so much for joining me for part 1 of my playthrough of Arkham Horror LCG. I had a lot of fun playing, and I hope you had a great time watching. Make sure you like and subscribe so you can be notified of the next scenario in the campaign. With that said, have a wonderful day.